Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Now to a special report on the Kavanaugh fight. Let's begin with a quote. The time for endless delay and obstruction has come to a close. Are those Obama's words? Republicans obstructed his nominee. No hearing for 293 days for Merrick Garland, who was a respected judge in the D.C. Circuit, the same court that Brett Kavanaugh serves on. But the quote that I just read you, of course, is not from Obama. It's from Mitch McConnell, who at 85 days into Kavanaugh's process, with 2 sets of hearings, says there's too much obstruction. McConnell trying to turn his team into the victim of obstruction. Now, the last Supreme Court nominee from another party, Garland, waited more than triple the amount of time that it took for Mitch McConnell to get to this point. This hypocrisy is quite blatant.
Let's let the American people decide. The Senate will appropriately revisit the matter when it considers the qualifications of the nominee the next president nominates, whoever that might be. This is a nomination that deserves to move forward, and that is precisely, Mr. President, what is happening. I think it's safe to say there will not be hearings or votes. They're committed to delaying, obstructing, and resisting this nomination with everything they've got.
One of my proudest moments is when I looked at Barack Obama in the eye and I said, Mr. President, you will not fill this Supreme Court vacancy.
There's that proud moment. And the time for endless obstruction, McConnell says, must end today. This isn't just about Trump, who's upended all sorts of traditions. And it's not only about McConnell, who may argue that as party leader, he's got to do partisan stuff. If the rest of the Senate's serious about protecting an independent court, those other senators have to stand up to the partisan people in their ranks. And if Lindsey Graham was historically accurate about one thing in his plaintive battle cry last week, it was that, yes, some senators on the committee have tried to do that and put judicial independence above party politics. But that's changing right now. Consider how a Republican who once ran this committee, Orrin Hatch, who had said there was no question Garland should be confirmed to the Supreme Court, is now changing in this political moment.
And we're not going to move or even discuss the qualifications of any nominee until after the presidential election.
The goal is delay. Nothing new to most of us. It should be clear now to all Americans that Democrats are engaged in a coordinated effort to stop Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation by any means possible. The driving objective here is not the truth, but politics.
You could judge for yourself whether Hatch is being consistent. He did once argue that I mentioned that Merrick Garland's credentials couldn't even be questioned, and that was before Obama announced that he agreed with Orrin Hatch, which apparently made Orrin Hatch disagree with himself. This is 1997.
To my knowledge, no one, absolutely no one, disputes the following. Merrick Garland is highly qualified to sit on the D.C. Circuit. His intelligence and his scholarship cannot be questioned.
Then there's Lindsey Graham invoking political calculus as part of the standard for how the Senate should do its advise and consent. In fact, he used the president's favorite medium to accuse Democrats of seeking a political outcome, keep the seat open, hope they win the midterms. Pathetic. You may notice the hypocrisy. It matches the exact McConnell strategy for Garland that Republicans used. And the public evidence suggests that what Graham wrote there is also inaccurate, because Dr. Ford tried to speak out before Kavanaugh was picked, not part of some Kavanaugh conspiracy theory where the Clintons are rigging the timing for the midterms. You can judge for yourself.
Just had a good meeting with Judge Garland. He's honest and capable. His reputation's beyond reproach. I've told him that I believe that the Scalia vacancy should be filled by the next president.
I would never do to them what you've done to this guy. This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics. And if you really wanted to know the truth, you sure as hell wouldn't have done what you've done to this guy.
When you complain about Garland, it's the arsonist complaining about the fire, as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't bother me one bit. Let me tell you, my Democratic friends, if this is the new norm, you better watch out for your nominees.
You better watch out for your nominees, except they already did that to your nominees. Now, on substance, the questions here are whether new information in Kavanaugh's responses should imperil the nomination. There's a higher standard for judges. Their word is bond. And Senator Graham from the 90s thought any kind of lying or perjury is unacceptable for a judge.
I have argued to you that when you found that a judge was a perjurer, you couldn't in good conscience send him back in a courtroom, because everybody that came in that courtroom thereafter would have a real serious doubt.
A real serious doubt. Now, whether Kavanaugh is promoted or goes back to the D.C. Circuit, those doubts may remain. The larger risk here is not just these tone-deaf threats of payback by warriors on the partisan field, but the prospect of having a nominee publicly mislead the Senate under oath, showing his word is not bond, and then getting this promotion anyway.
It is Thursday, the 4th of October of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. My. And I got to tell you, South Carolina is really far from New Orleans, so don't even think about it, Lindsay. Don't you dare. Wasn't that grand? Listening to Republicans speak out of both sides of their mouths, and not from very long ago even. I mean, it's one thing for them to say what they said, back during the Clinton years, because that's all we know. It's just ancient history by now. But, what they said just, I don't know, mere months or a year or so ago. Boy, how quickly they can turn it around. And Mitch McConnell, I mean, he really does count on the vast majority of America being as stupid as the people who vote for them. He thinks, and they think by extension, that we don't have any memory, that we can't see through the subterfuge. I mean, it's obvious. They don't even hide it anymore. And speaking of which, I mean, they're way past the Lee Atwater thing, right? I know it was Carville who came up with, you can get anybody to do anything if you wave $100 in a trailer park. But when Lindsay said that, we're going to be blamed for the class warfare now, aren't we? Aren't we always? If we happen to make money the honest way, we are crooks because we're not supposed to make money. Right? That old argument, oh, you're making money? How can you be a liberal? What? Okay, well, I guess maybe Mitch McConnell is banking on America being as stupid as the people who vote for him, and I hope that he's not right. Though there's a lot of evidence to prove that he might be. And since I'm an optimist, ultimately, there's a lot of evidence that proves that he is so incorrect, that his ignorant, by design, in many cases, ignorant on purpose, base they're still only going to be about a third of the population. And that's what's just so maddening. The minority is running this country, and they are driving it into the ground. Just like we said they would. All right, well, what's on the rest of the menu? Here, in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Trump's pick to run the Social Security Administration impersonated a police officer in 2012 to avoid a trespassing charge. He wasn't supposed to be where he was. And he knew it. Georgia is sued for purging minority voters ahead of the midterm elections. Well, that's one way to diminish our overwhelming numbers in this upcoming election, isn't it not? And 21 House Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee voted just last month to keep Trump's sketchy tax practices hidden from the public. Yeah, what we don't know won't hurt us. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Devin Nunes is slammed for backing Trump on his anti-immigrant rampage, while at the same time his family uses undocumented immigrant labor. Well, that's speaking out of both sides of your mouth now, isn't it? And, speaking of which, lies don't get more brazen than the one Dana Rohrabacher is telling his constituents about health care. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will notice right there as the page loads and the scroll, and you know what a scroll is, begins. Those are links in which you can determine whether you are registered to vote, and if you're not, there's a link in which you can register to vote. It's rock the vote. Come on. Okay? So let's do that. And even though you know the purging of voters is ongoing, let's just keep up, all right? Let's not presume that everything is hunky-dory. That's how old I am. I would use a term like hunky-dory. All right. So then, after you've done that, do scroll to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, and you will notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link. If you have any concerns, questions, or just want to engage, there are people there to do that. And Kelly Lincoln monitors that, though she's pretty busy with work. But she's in there whenever she's home or opens up her phone. So do engage there, and also check out her shows on Saturday at the Table with Kelly Lincoln. It's a happy hour, too. And that begins at 3 p.m. on the West Coast, 6 p.m. on the East Coast, just in time for Manhattan. And then later on, she teams up with Ricky, and they command the Roundtable Roundhouse Power Hour, beginning at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast. And so do that, please. Then, if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can certainly do that, because you can find us at Netroots Radio. Let's see here. You can follow Netroots Radio on Facebook. Of course you can. And you can also, I guess you could find us on Tumblr and a few of the other social media platforms. So you can also follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, where I can be found as Justice Putnam. Follow the show on Facebook, and if you want to follow us on Twitter, you'll have to use the handle at Cookbook West. And you can still make the association, can't you? I mean, we're Democrats. We know how to multitask. Jeez. I never understood intellects that only were able to keep like one or two things. You know, I can only get one or two things. I mean, we're Democrats. We keep like, I don't know. It's more than a juggler can handle. Let's just put it that way. That's how adept we are. So let's maximize it. And speaking of which, in terms of maximizing, pick up the podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, iTunes, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. Rebecca Intrago brings us this first offering here on the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and of course, she writes for Think Progress. The Senate Finance Committee held a hearing on Tuesday morning on Donald Trump's nominee to lead the Social Security Administration, Andrew Saul, a former vice chairman of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Like other Trump nominees, Saul has no background in the field he was chosen to lead. He did, however, serve on the board of the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, a right-wing think tank whose visiting fellows include Charles Murray, a race scientist who has argued that white people are intellectually superior to black and Latinx individuals, and Abigail Thernstrom, a political scientist who believes that affirmative action programs set black children up for failure and that race barriers in America were eliminated when President Barack Obama was elected, because we finally elected a black man, so that means no one is racist anymore. And what I experienced is that people were always racist, and they came out of the woodwork. Having a black guy as president was just, a bridge too far for those people. Yeah. All right. Well, the Manhattan Institute has published a number of articles advocating drastic cuts to Social Security benefits, an ideology that is in direct conflict with the role of the Commissioner of Social Security. But you don't want somebody who is actually beholding to the idea of such a socialist program when mobster thugs can loot it and use it for what they want, which is usually, losing it. Because that's what crooks always do. Which reminds me, I wish my dad had given me $413 million so I could go bankrupt 6 times. How stupid do you have to be to get that much money over time and lose it so many times that you have to go bankrupt? 6. Not 4. Not 5, but 6. And as far as I know, he might have to go bankrupt a 7th time. Certainly looks that way. So why not rob Social Security on the way out? Well, Social Security advocates this week spoke out against Saul's nomination, fearing even more cuts to a program that 63 million retired and disabled Americans rely on. Alex Lawson, who we have interviewed in various incarnations here at Netroots Radio, mostly at Netroots Nation meetups. And he is the executive director of Social Security Works. And he compared Trump and Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Compared Saul to those two. Now, Saul graduated from the Wharton School in 1968, the same year as Trump did. Like Trump and many of Trump's appointees, including Kavanaugh, Saul appears to believe that his wealth and privilege should make him above the law. Well, of course, they're anointed by God. Otherwise, how else would they have all that wealth? And then there's another, argument that would say, actually, blaming God for your wealth is just a flimsy excuse because you feel guilty about stealing. This is not a man who should be in charge of Social Security, a program that is an essential lifeline for over 60 million Americans and their families, Lawson added. A vote for Andrew Saul is a vote against Social Security. And the Senate Finance Committee must reject this nomination. Well, they're not going to listen to Alex Lawson. And they're not going to even listen to any Democrats on the committee. Why would they? That criticism can arguably be attributed to an incident in 2012 when Saul impersonated a police commissioner to get out of a trespassing charge. Saul, then age 65, wow, he was bicycling at a reservoir in Westchester County in April that year, when witnesses said he stopped to lift his bike over a barrier in order to ride beyond a no trespassing sign and across the dam. It was a shorter route, flatter, probably a little bit more, if it wasn't paved, at least it had, a proper bike path for an old guy at 65 to be able to pedal. I know, I'm almost there. Well, an officer assigned to the Department of Environmental Protection ordered Saul to stop, but when the cop turned his head to continue his conversation with a couple walking by, Saul hopped back on his bike and tried to ride off. So the cop really thinks he's going to outrun a cop, even on a bicycle. Well, sources said the officer grabbed Saul and the two men crashed to the ground, and that's when Saul claimed he was a police commissioner. According to the police department, the DEP, Saul was allowed to go home and get his identification when he returned. He showed the officer an MTA police department card, which, the Post noted, was typically given out to civilian officials as a courtesy. Oh. Well, officials later confirmed they had stopped Saul, but did not elaborate on claims he had presented himself as a police officer. Because, when the fix is in, you can't really divulge those sorts of things. It might be an issue of national security. Learner, also of Think Progress, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe. Voting activists claimed that purged voters in Georgia were not notified when they were removed from the rolls. Well, of course not. If you let people know, they might have time to register again. I mean, come on. This is win at all costs. Oh, which reminds me, they haven't completely abandoned the Lee Atwater model, because whenever you hear a personage like a Mitch McConnell, a Lindsey Graham invoke the Democrats as using any means necessary to keep Kavanaugh off the bench, it was Malcolm X who used that term. And in the lizard brain of their base, they see a scary black guy coming to kill them. Okay? So when we say, or when we're accused of using any means necessary, of course that's a dog whistle. And I would argue it's not a dog whistle. It's a bullhorn. Voting activists have announced a lawsuit against Georgia Secretary of State and GOP gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp, alleging he used a racially biased method to purge roughly 700,000 voters from the rolls ahead of the November election. 700,000! The lawsuit, announced on Tuesday, alleges that Kemp has not notified the affected voters, who represent roughly 1 in 10 Georgians eligible to cast a ballot, that they have been removed from the rolls over the last 2 years. In additional to legal action, the activists plan to make a list of purged voters public so that individuals can check for their names and then re-register before the October 9th deadline. And I bet Kemp's going to go to court to say, do not release that information. Because when you're trying to destroy America, I think maybe you would keep that information a state secret. Wouldn't you? Kemp's office relies on the interstate voter registration cross-check program maintained by Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach. Chris Kobach. How many times has he lost in court? And of course, we know that cross-check, that system is extremely flawed. And I'll just give you a quick idea, okay, of how cross-check works. you're in Georgia. Your name happens to be, I don't know, it could be something like R.J. Putnam. Okay? And so then they check another state and find out, you know what? There's a Robert Jackson Putnam over there in Idaho. We think this is the same guy. We take R.J. Putnam off. The groups filing the lawsuit include the Southern Christian Leadership Council, Conference, Rainbow Push, Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda, and the New Georgia Project. Investigative reporter and journalist Greg Palast is also named as a plaintiff, alleging the state has not responded to his request to public information regarding the purges. Now, Kemp, who has refused to recuse himself from administering the upcoming election while he campaigns for governor, said in a statement that the threatened lawsuit has no merit. To be crystal clear, Georgia has never used data from the cross-check program to conduct list maintenance in any capacity, Kemp said in his statement. 0 voters have been removed from the rolls based on cross-check data in this state. Greg Palast is completely blind to this indisputable fact in his pursuit of a sensationalist headline. I mean, look at that hat. That last part about the hat was in this reporter's embellishment, okay? Real journalists have already reported that Georgia does not use this data for list maintenance, frankly. Mr. Palast should be embarrassed, and any credibility that he had left is now completely destroyed. Palast and the voting group said the Georgia lawsuit is just the first of 26 they plan to file across the country in states that use Kobach's cross-check system. Here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, on this Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, is yet another article out of Think Progress, this time by Josh Israel. Well, 21 repugs voted to keep Trump's sketchy tax practices hidden from the public. The New York Times published a lengthy investigative report, and everybody knows about it. I mean, lengthy. 46 pages. Jesus. Accusing Donald Trump of participating in dubious tax schemes during the 90s, including instances of outright fraud. Well, I would say that even though that the statute of limitations has expired on those dubious tax practices that are bordering, if not outright illegal, what about the ones he's doing now? Is that why we can't see his taxes? Well, relying on a vast trove of confidential tax returns and financial records, the Times determined that Trump helped his parents dodge taxes, established with his siblings a sham corporation to disguise billions of dollars in gifts from their parents, assisted their father in taking improper tax deductions worth millions more, and formulated a strategy to undervalue his parents' real estate holdings by hundreds of millions of dollars on tax returns, sharply reducing the tax bill when their properties were transferred to him and his siblings. Well, isn't that odd? Well, now, in order for the public to really evaluate whether the President of the United States is himself a tax cheat, the public would need to see his tax returns. And, of course, we know that unlike everybody else who has ever run for office, for I would maintain in any capacity, Trump has refused to release his tax returns. Now, last month, the House Ways and Means Committee considered a bill to make Trump's tax cuts for corporations and the very rich permanent. Lloyd Doggett of Texas offered an amendment to make the bill contingent upon Trump's tax returns being disclosed. On a party line vote, the amendment was killed 21-15. Now, who were these 21? Well, they would be Representative Mike Bishop, Republican of Maine, Diane Black of Tennessee, Kevin Brady of Texas, Vern Buchanan of Florida, Carlos Curbelo of Florida, Lynn Jenkins of Kansas, Sam Johnson of Texas, Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania, Darren LaHood of Illinois, Kenny Marchant of Texas, Kristi Noem of South Dakota, Devin Nunes of California, Eric Paulson of Minnesota, Tom Reed of New York, David Reichert of Washington, Peter Roxham of Illinois, David Schweikert of Arizona, Adrian Smith of Nebraska, Jason Smith of Missouri, Jackie Walorski of Indiana, and Brad Wenstrup of Ohio. Now, Think Progress reached out for comment from these individuals, and of course, none was forthcoming. All right, because they don't want anyone to know that either. Let's get to our break, and when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, doing more. Donald Trump has the role and the powers of the President of the United States of America. He either doesn't know what those are or doesn't care, maneuvering instead to be the type of rapacious, unimpeachable, despotic strongman that our country has claimed to oppose for the last 70 years. If that scares you, then congratulations. You have at least a passing interest in living in a democracy, and you should never listen to an evening talk show host skewer Trump again. Instead, you should watch Michael Moore's latest piece of gonzo documentary activism, Fahrenheit 11/9. Michael Moore makes documentaries like Protesters Make Signs, championing the people who think they are the consumers in our corporate, mercantile, militaristic society, but who are, more often than not, the consumed. This film finds Moore talking with working-class blacks and whites who've been mangled by Republicans and abandoned by Democrats, and who now stand to be devastated by Trump and his ilk. These examinations take him back to his hometown, Flint, Michigan. Yeah, that Flint. To look at how Michigan's former CEO Governor Rick Snyder has poisoned one of his cities. But Moore also spends time with Parkland High School gun control activists. He spends time with the new grassroots Democratic candidates who are challenging the party elite. Because where there's a similar appeal to a Moore movie and a Colbert monologue, there's an important difference. They're both funny. Moore likes to laugh just as much as you do. Moore still has his signature theatrical activist turns aimed at the people who are used to unimpeachably dishing it out, but Moore is not out to sell network ad dollars. He doesn't want you calm down and ready to buy something. He wants to show you that you can fight back, even if it's with a movie camera. Fahrenheit 11/9 shows how we got here, but more importantly, shows it's possible to get up and get out there. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
Racially and ethnically speaking, I'm truly a global human. Irish, Black, Anglo, Native American, Italian, all that and more. My father always said that our family was Heinz 57, like the brand of steak sauce supposedly made of 57 zesty ingredients. Good enough for me. A great strength of America is our mixed population, continuously fueled by generations of immigrants coming as refugees. Consider the typical story of 16-year-old Friedrich, who fled his tiny German village where he faced a dreary future of poverty. Arriving in Manhattan in 1885 with no money and little education, He was nonetheless greeted by America's open immigration policy and welcomed into citizenship. Friedrich soon prospered, eventually opening hotels and taverns. And God bless America, only 3 generations later, Friedrich Trump's grandson would become president of the USA. Alas, though, grandbaby Donald would not even have let Friedrich in. Indeed, Donald denigrates and has ruthlessly shut out penniless refugees like his grandfather, though such migrants are now more likely to be named Federico and come from Latin America. Trump especially hates a process he calls chain migration, whereby American citizens can obtain U.S. residency for their foreign relatives. They bring their whole family with them, Trump repeatedly rants. Not acceptable, he barked in a recent Twitter tantrum. But, psst, guess who just used chain migration to benefit his own family? Yes, the Donald. In August, the Slovenian parents of Trump's immigrant wife Melania quietly became American citizens through the process their son-in-law so loudly denounces as not acceptable. This is Jim Hightower saying, in Trump world, integrity and consistency aren't virtues. All that matters is, what's in it for me right now?
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
If you are a multi-millionaire, your right to protest in Washington, D.C. may be safe enough, but for everyone else...
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
If you want to be heard and seen by federal public officials, the most important places to protest in Washington, D.C. are the mall, or in front of the White House, or these days, in front of the Trump Hotel. All locations controlled by the National Park Service. Recently, the National Park Service has proposed regulations that would require protesters to pay, quote, event management costs which include the salaries of everyone involved in monitoring a protest, march, demonstration, or gathering, as well as the cost of the fencing and the barrels and the trash removal and sanitation charges, and a cost for any damage that might be done to any blade of grass, called the harm to turf charge. The Supreme Court famously stated, quote, wherever the title of streets and parks may rest, they have immemorially been held in trust for the use of the public and used for purposes of assembly, communicating thoughts between citizens, and discussing public questions, part of the privileges, immunities, and rights and liberties of citizens. Soon enough, we'll find out if this right still exists.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The White House received the results of the FBI investigation into Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and sent the results directly to the Senate early Thursday, saying it was, quote, fully confident the nominee will be confirmed. Earlier, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said he is pushing ahead with a Friday vote, though it was unclear if Kavanaugh has enough support. If the nomination clears that procedural vote, a final vote could come as soon as Saturday.
This evening, the Senate will receive the results of the FBI supplemental background investigation of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. So I'm filing cloture on Judge Kavanaugh's nomination this evening, so the process can move forward.
Senate stands adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
That's all Senate talk, of course. It means the key procedural vote on Kavanaugh can begin 1 hour after the Senate convenes Friday. It means we could have a full and final Senate vote by this weekend. Before that, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee will get their first look at the FBI's new background investigation into Brett Kavanaugh. NBC News has confirmed Chairman Grassley will be the first one allowed to review the findings at 8 a.m. Eastern. Then ranking member Senator Dianne Feinstein will have a chance as head of the Dems on the committee at 9 a.m., Senate Judiciary Republicans at 10 a.m., then committee Democrats at 11 a.m. In all, about 109 people are allowed to see the investigation results. Right now, Senate Majority Leader McConnell has no plans to make the report public. But tonight there are major questions being asked about the way this investigation was conducted and why it didn't take all the time it was allowed. NBC News has learned it was significantly limited in scope. President Trump has insisted publicly he was not curtailing the FBI probe, but privately, the White House restricted the FBI from delving deeply into Kavanaugh's youthful drinking and exploring whether he had lied to Congress about his alcohol use. More than 40 people with potential information about these allegations against Kavanaugh have not been contacted by the FBI, nor has the Bureau interviewed Judge Kavanaugh or Dr. Ford themselves.
Kavanaugh's freshman year college roommate accused the Supreme Court nominee of lying under oath. James Roach told CNN that Kavanaugh was, quote, notably heavier in his drinking than other people and was drunk frequently.
I wasn't able to watch the testimony. I was in an airplane, but I read the testimony the next day, and I was struck as I was reading it that, I know Debbie Ramirez, and I know from my experience with her that, at least from my perspective, there is zero chance that she is making up this story. And I heard Dr. Blasey Ford's, or I read Dr. Blasey Ford's testimony, and I heard some of it later, and I believe that she's telling the truth. But then when Brett started saying things about his drinking and his use of certain words, sexually oriented words, I knew he was lying because he was my roommate. We were in a room together. Our beds were 10 feet apart for a couple of months. And what struck me and made me more interested in speaking out about it is not only did I know that he wasn't telling the truth, I knew that he knew that he wasn't telling the truth.
Tensions are rising between the U.S. and Iran. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced Wednesday that the U.S. would terminate the 1955 Treaty of Amity with Iran. The Trump administration argued that Iran was using the treaty as cover to challenge U.S. sanctions in the International Court of Justice. The move came hours after the UN's highest court ordered the U.S. to lift some sanctions against Iran that affect imports of humanitarian goods and products. At a White House briefing later Wednesday, National Security Advisor John Bolton announced the United States is also withdrawing from the optional dispute resolution process to the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. Bolton said that decision was made in connection with a case brought by the, quote, so-called state of Palestine over Trump's decision to relocate the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The United States will still participate in the underlying Vienna Convention, he added. Bolton cast the decisions on the Vienna Convention and the Iran Treaty as in line with his earlier vow not to cooperate with the International Criminal Court. Trump and the White House lashed out at the New York Times on Wednesday over its bombshell report on the president's finances, which alleged that Trump inherited millions of dollars from his father and that his family used dodgy business practices and tax strategies to protect their wealth.
It's a totally false attack based on an old recycled news story. I'm not going to sit and go through every single line of a very boring 14,000-word story. The president's lawyer addressed some of the specific claims and walked through how the allegations of fraud and tax evasion are 100% false and highly defamatory. There was no fraud or tax evasion by anyone. He went on much further, and I would encourage you to read every word of his statement, which completely undercuts the accusations made by the New York Times.
Are the president's taxes still under audit?
I know that a number of his taxes are still under audit.
From the 90s and early 2000s?
I'd have to check and get back to you. Celia?
Any of his tax returns?
I'm not aware of any plans to do so.
That's Sarah Sanders speaking in her first White House press briefing since September 10th.
I got good news.
And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Oh, I meant to mention, just as a little note on the personal calendar, today I see a surgeon about my crunched ankle. That is the damage, the accumulated damage, beginning as and during my days as a jock. So yeah, I have a crunched ankle, and it's been crunched for a very long time. I first had it diagnosed as essentially having no meniscus left in the ankle way back in '94 by a sports medicine guy, one of the top guys in Europe. And so he gave me some advice on how to maintain it and what I should do, and until I have surgery, or because he was an osteopath as well, but so they don't always push for surgery. But he gave me the heads up, and just I don't know, a couple of months ago, less, it just started burning more and more than it really has ever. And I thought, well, I'll just get a cortisone shot. But the ankle is such a compact little compartment that not just anybody can stick a needle in there. So you really do need a surgeon. So I'll have it determined whether I'm just going to get the cortisone shot or we have to do something more drastic, which is probably to fish out all the debris. Because it was described as a shipwreck in there, meaning there's a lot of debris floating around. I mean, I'd have to pull it out. Eek! So I'll find that out today, or at least go through the beginning process. And take the massive constant burning away, and I'll be happy. But try not to do it with drugs. I never take drugs for medicinal reasons. Okay, that's how they get you hooked. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees. Ostensibly, we're supposed to be cooler than we were yesterday, but we're already at 61 degrees. We're supposed to go to 68 to 70. I think we might be a tad warmer, but that's just me. Mostly cloudy for the day, and right now the winds are out of the southwest, and they will be picking up, of course, in just a couple of hours when they shift out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we have no percentage of possibility of rain during the day, but it does pick up as we get into the evening hours, where it's going to be about 30%, and winds will still be out of the west-northwest, but light and variable. And then tomorrow, it looks like we're expected to get about a quarter to a third of an inch of rain. So we look for that. And but then we're going to have a high tomorrow of 57 after an overnight low in the low 40s. Yeah. So that is getting a little bit cooler. All right. Ragweed pollen is now high. That air quality index has dropped precipitously, no pun intended, to 9 parts per million. And that's in the good, very good, which is green range. Now, the UV index is moderate, and that daytime UV is at 4, and that continues to drop too. The barometric pressure in the region is holding at 29.86 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 62%, though that will be increasing as the rains tonight build up. All right. We like to see rain around here. It's Oregon. You got to have rain in Oregon. We're supposed to be a rainforest. Well, most of it is. Okay, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 63 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 69 and sunny. Rome is 76 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 50 degrees fair with wind. Kabul is 56 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 74 and clear. Tokyo is 68 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 59 degrees with rain and wind. If they're saying that in Australia, it's a hurricane, because Australians are tough. They don't just call anything rain and wind. Jesus. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 70 degrees Fahrenheit, mostly cloudy, with a bright yellow sun peeking between the clouds. Oh, New York. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Tommy Christopher of Share Blue Media brings us this first offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Democratic congressional candidate Andrew Jans slammed Representative Devin Nunes, Repug of California, as hypocritical because Nunes fiercely supports the virulently anti-immigrant Trump, even though Nunes' family reportedly employs undocumented immigrants. People want to make sure we have a congressman that is not hypocritical, said Jans. And he told that to Mother Jones, by the way. In this circumstance, we have one who has sided with Trump on every immigration policy, including separating families and deporting undocumented immigrants, but somehow Devin and his family don't have a problem hiring undocumented workers. Jans's comments referenced a lengthy investigative report by Esquire's Ryan Lizza, who found that the Iowa dairy farm owned by Nunes' parents has employed covenant undocumented workers. Now, of course, you do know that Devin Nunes doesn't really have any real property. You know, he doesn't have a family farm anymore in California. They left a decade or more ago. The family hightailed it out of the San Joaquin Valley and went to Iowa. Okay, just to be clear. So he's not getting his hands dirty on the family farm. Not at all. Now, one source told Lizza that he repeatedly referred undocumented immigrants to the Nunes farm for work. And another man said he worked on the Nunes farm for 4 years as an undocumented immigrant. Lizza was able to uncover these details despite a campaign of intimidation that included several Nunes family members following him around town as he worked on the story. One of the vehicles that tailed Lizza even had a vanity plate featuring the name of the Nunes farm, New Star. Boy, I'm not getting any milk from New Star. While Nunes isn't too vocal about it, he supports many of Trump's hardline anti-immigration policies. He's voted to fund Trump's border wall and to penalize sanctuary cities that protect immigrant rights. And in the face of Trump's worst human rights violations against immigrants, Nunes has been cowardly at best. At the height of Trump's family separation crisis, I would say crises, Nunes was conspicuously silent even as other California Republicans weighed in. At the time, Jans said Nunes' silence shows that he supported the policy at the outset. Well, when Nunes' family did speak out, it was only to praise Trump's sham executive order, which purported to stop family separations, but also sought to allow the indefinite detention of migrant families because they should be made to suffer. How dare you try to find a job in this country? And then if you don't find a job, they hate you too. Jeez. Well, Nunes has engaged in a long-term campaign to undermine the Mueller investigation by promoting wild conspiracy theories and trying to oust Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and it should be Stein. Devin Nunes' support for Trump is disgraceful on its own, but is even more despicable, given that his family relies on the undocumented immigrants whom Trump torments.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Aaron Rupert of Think Progress brings us this last offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. How? Now, this is me. This is in this reporter's opinion. How much do I despise Dana Rohrabacher? Oh, let me count the ways. On Wednesday afternoon, Dana Rohrabacher shared a touching campaign video detailing how his daughter, Annika's leukemia diagnosis made the need to protect people with pre-existing conditions personal for him. Politicians argue a lot about health care, but for me it's personal, Rohrabacher said while standing next to his daughter. When my daughter Annika was 8 years old, she was afflicted with leukemia. It was devastating to my family, but we got through it. Today she's doing great. Now let me just cut in real quick. It is tragic and heartbreaking that his daughter has leukemia. But these people are so craven, and I mean Dana Rohrabacher. So craven. Well, then he goes on to say that it's, he's fighting for pre-existing conditions because it's terrible what politicians and insurance companies have done to take away his daughter's right to life. Isn't that crazy? Except Rohrabacher's words are belied by his actions. Last year he voted for the American Health Care Act, or as it's sometimes known, Trump Care. And that bill stood to cost 24 million plus people their health insurance, while making coverage more expensive for people who need it the most, like his daughter. But it doesn't matter. He's on a government insurance program anyway. And what I want to know, is his family still covered by any government health insurance, like the the health care for all that government employees and elected officials get? Not employees, but government officials get. Do the families still get that when somebody like Dana Rohrabacher is in jail? I was wondering, how much do the families have to suffer for the actions of, their seditious family member? Well, it's always been a curiosity. Well, you know what? We better get out of here. We're at the end of our broadcast period, and I got to hurry up because I got to get to that surgeon so I can get this ankle diagnosed, looked at, and then we'll make a plan from there. But we are going to visit up tomorrow. Yes, we are, because the show always must go on. Which reminds me, stay tuned to Netroots Radio all through the day, because it's got breaking news, and we'll visit with you tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. because we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio for breaking news all day and all night as it breaks. And we'll visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.